Welcome to another episode of the Who I Became podcast. My name is Simon Osmo, and in today's episode, I'm joined by my good friend Michael Rozin. Now, Michael is a president and founding partner at Rozin Security. For nearly 20 years, he's focused on terrorism prevention, and he served in the Israeli Defense Forces as a sergeant. He also preceded me as a special operations manager at Mall of America, Minnesota. Now, I've known Michael for a little under 10 years, and knew he transformed himself many times, having lived in Russia, Bulgaria, Israel, and now the US. But it was only during a recent conversation that I learned his true entrepreneurial spirit, how he coped with not having his birth father present in his life, and how he's bullied as a child for being Jewish.
Welcome to the Who I Became podcast.
Well, Michael Rozin, welcome to the Who I Became podcast.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor.
Well, Michael, you are like me, that you are a foreign man in the US, but I guess now you're an American citizen. So I should start off by saying that you've lived in Belarus, you've lived in Bulgaria, you've lived in Israel, and now you've lived in the US. So you're a well-traveled man.
That's true. Yeah, I just that's how the life happened to be.
And Michael, I got to know you when I moved to the US because, a bit about both our backgrounds. We were both the special operations captain at Mall of America in Minnesota. You're the founder of the program, and I was graciously entrusted to oversee the program that you'd built. So I'm really grateful for Doug Reynolds for allowing me to do that. But, you've got a very interesting and travelled past. And, before you came to the US, you were a sort of, how would you describe it, Michael? Would you say that you were a sort of an expert in behaviour detection? Maybe talk a bit about what led up to your sort of training.
Yeah, so before I came to United States, I came here from Israel, and my last job in Israel, I was a security agent with Israel Security Agency, Shin Bet. It's our internal security entity that's similar to what the United States would be FBI and Secret Service and FPS. In Israel, it's all done under one umbrella. And so I was a agent at our airport in Israel, in Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv. And, the academy and then my work at Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv kind of framed the behavior, threat detection, threat mitigation expertise that I further refined and developed more so in the United States. But it's the academy in Israel and the years thereafter that kind of frame the behavior detection expertise.
Yeah, and I know when you're at Mall of America, the program was called RAM, Risk Assessment Mitigation, and sort of, now you've gone on to your own consulting. You've sort of really enhanced that program. It's mostly like a program on steroids now, but I know you teach it not only nationally here in the US, but internationally as well, and a lot of law enforcement agencies use that. And maybe tell us a bit about that program, Michael, what you developed.
Yeah, so the program we have developed called SIRA, stands for Suspicion, Indicators, Recognition, Assessment. And, I'm just really blessed, the knowledge that the state of Israel gave me and the experience there. And I was able to kind of materialize it and refine it and put in place in the United States because the program truly works, and kind of the core of it is man-made threats and enabling security and law enforcement professionals proactively identify the right threat elements who might intend to cause harm and interdict them, stop them from being able to do so through deterrence, through intervention, through other protocols that are part of the program. And, the reason I say we're blessed and kind of what drives me and my company and we work, sometimes crazy hours and it's busy work, but, there's nothing more rewarding than when you have a law enforcement partner calling you one day and say, Michael, thank you so much. Your program works. We identified a terrorist perpetrator that is now charged and is going to be prosecuted, or a school district that calls you and says, thank you, because we're able to prevent a next strategy in our school. And so those are the kind of stuff that this program is designed to do at its core and what it does.
Yeah, and I know, Michael, when you're at the mall, it could have been soon after, that the Homeland Security recognized the sort of your work at Mall of America.
Yeah, it was really a humbling experience. The Department of Homeland Security and the United States House of Representatives, the Committee of Homeland Security, recognized our program at Mall of America as an example, as a model of what security in the United States, especially in entities open to the public, should look like. So that was really a humbling experience for me personally, of course, for everyone involved in this program with me.
Yeah, and it was, the legacy that you left behind when I took over at Mall of America was a bit like Barack Obama. You most probably don't want to be the first black president of the US. You want to be the guy after. Because whenever I was like Michael Rozin, I was like, can I get this guy out of my hair for a minute? But I mean, the program that you built was fantastic, and you've done a lot of great work since, and you continue to do it. And Michael, a lot of this conversation was really born from me and you having a happy hour a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I was like, Michael, I've known you like 10 years now. You're a good friend. I didn't know some of this stuff, and it was fascinating. So you are, like I said, you're nationally known, you're internationally known. You do great work in and around the sort of counterterrorism space and behavior detection space. But there's some interesting things about your background. And one of them I'll just start off by. You can speak Russian, Bulgarian, English, Hebrew, and I think it says basic Arabic. I don't know if that means that it's like elementary level, or you were just putting it on there, Michael, just to add another language. But I can just about speak English. So I don't know how you do that. And like I started off with saying, you lived in all these different countries, but you told me something about when you lived in Belarus, when you sort of grew up in Belarus, and most people would say, well, Michael's this counterterrorism guy, he works at this famous airport, he's built and designed his programs. But when we're talking about behavior detection, it was interesting because you said, well, I was bullied as a child, and part of those skills that I got and that awareness, I still use to this day. So maybe tell us a bit about what it was like growing up in Belarus as a Jewish, or at that point maybe perceived to be Jewish when you weren't necessarily practicing Jew, and then sort of being bullied.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, in many ways, my experience in Belarus, maybe later now, I tend to realize, it's that, I have been bullied and felt plenty unsafe and felt discriminated many times. And I'll tell you my experience there. But I think it's that kind of experience that later down in my more adult years, I think maybe subconsciously to extent, kind of drive me towards this, helping others, helping to protect others from whatever harm there is. And that's kind of, the desire to protect others is so strong in me I think maybe that's why. And I think the second part, the behavior detection, I think why it innately comes to me, and I'm really good at that when I focus and do this. I think partially I feel like it's because, as a kid, right, as the 6-year-old, 7-year-old kid, I had to predict who's going to be the next one, right? Who's gonna give me the blue eye or break my hand, and that kind of constant reading of people and situations and circumstances probably was the first boot camp academy that I received in a behavior detection career. But, my experience in Belarus, Belarus was a tough place to grow up as a Jewish kid. The anti-Semitism, the hatred for Jews, and, you said religion, and, I think it's, we think of being Jewish in the Western world primarily as a religious choice, right? Where, in Russia and the Eastern Bloc, right? This is a lot more, and other parts of the world, it's a lot more about ethnicity, right? So at that time, really practicing Judaism was not even truly allowed in Russia and Belarus. So, I learned about the Jewish traditions from my grandparents, from my mom a little bit, but honestly, we never really practiced that. It's, being a Jewish person was more of an ethnic thing for me growing up.
Yeah.
And, the discrimination against the Jews was something that that I start feeling personally. I heard the rumors, right, I remember in kindergarten kind of hearing, where my mom, who's a doctor and very, very successful doctor, but, she would have a hard time getting a job because they would always, prioritize the non-Jewish doctors before the Jewish doctors. And, they would give the Jewish doctors the worst shifts, so she would always work overnights and weekends. So, kind of as a kid, you hear those things. And then I personally started experiencing, I still remember this day one of my school, first grade. And we lived in next to Minsk, one of the suburbs of Minsk. It's the capital of Belarus. And I'm in this elementary school, and I remember, you have to sit, we all have to sit, just like this, like your hands on your knees, you have to be nice and straight. And the teacher comes in, she sits at the table, and she has this list of names, and she does a roll call basically of who is in the classroom. And when you hear your name, you're supposed to raise your hand and say, yes, I'm here. And so, everyone goes this way. And then of course it comes to me, and she says, Rozin. I raise my hand to say, yes, I'm here. And at that point, most of the classroom went, ha, 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 ha. They start joking. There are those derogatory terms for the Jewish people in Russia that exist. And, people start throwing those derogatory terms left and right. And after this first break, I remember stepping after this first class, stepping in a break session, and it was on. That was the first kind of fight that I experienced. It was right at the first hour in the first break. And from this point on, I spent in the public school system of Belarus something like 5 to 6 years before we left Belarus. For Bulgaria. And, there were so many people that wanted to kick my butt regularly that I think they internally had to make a schedule of who's going to do it next because there was not enough time to do it. And, maybe I wasn't too smart of, trying to avoid it all the time or running away. Many times I would just fight the best of my ability, and I did not know what I was doing at that point. And so I end up with, broken nose, and going home with blue eyes was kind of like it was just like a normal state of existence for me. My hands were broken 4 times, right? Some of them were because I was fighting. Some of them was like, I was on the floor and someone was really cranking my hand, and then I could hear it break. In fact, doctors told me that if I broke my hands one more time, they'll have to put stents inside it because it's not going to heal anymore. Broken ribs a couple of times, bruised, all the time. And, it was kind of like my mom was very upset, and she kept trying to do something about it, and she was very vocal about this issue. But I remember I can somehow, some way, when I was in between classrooms, between sessions, and when those fights were, no teachers were around really, no one was really caring, and even I remember like after some big fights, you go in the classroom, and it could now thinking it back, you could see this kid, right, sitting there, right, whimpering there. I was, I'm probably bruised left and right, and the teacher just kind of continued as a normal thing without really caring too much. And that was kind of my reality, honestly, signing for my first 5 years of the public schools in Belarus. And that kind of reality, I felt like, just made me very much, like I became, first I started being very concerned about being honest that I was Jewish, right? So I tried to hide it, right? People that do not know me, I always try to hide it and pretend that I'm not. That's the first thing that happened. Second, it made me really try to look and predict and try to read people. Again, I did not have any professional training being, first or fifth grader.
Your instinct there, didn't you?
But, I would say that I would be paying a lot closer attention to humans in front of me than an average second grader or third grader would typically do that. So that was my first 5 years of.
And that was an interesting 5 years. And I tell you, when me and you were talking about this over the happy hour a few weeks ago, what struck me as a very, I suffered nowhere near the discrimination, Michael, that you did. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. But I can remember as a child that someone once attacked me for being black. They actually closed a steel door in my face, and I've got a scar on my forehead as a result, and someone called me the N-word, and I remember that part about it. But even that at the time, I can't remember how old I was, maybe 10 or 11, race wasn't really a big thing for me. And the reason why I say that story is it reminded me of when me and you were talking, is that at that time you were being sort of victimized for being Jewish, where you were a kid, and you said that your faith didn't really come until you were in your 20s. So, I mean, how did it feel when you were being attacked for something that at that age you couldn't really even relate to too much?
Again, it's, this is the thing, the interesting thing, right, about being Jewish, right? And I learned that kind of perception, right? Actually, when I come to the United States, and I remember, me and, my wife, right, we're having this discussion about the fact that United States, right, the concept of being Jewish is associated primarily with religion, right? You practice religion, and I understand. I had no affiliation with Judaism at the time, very little, at least when I was bullied for being Jewish. But again, like for us in Russia and overseas, Jewish is a lot more about ethnicity. It's and I had this point, right? So my wife would always disagree with me at first. She would say, look, this is not about ethnicity. It's a religious choice to be Jewish or not. I said, no, I think it's about ethnicity. I mean, I grew up that way. It's about ethnicity. And we walk on the street, and she sees a couple, and she says, oh, look at this couple. I think they're Jewish, and they live in the area. And I ask her, did you know if they practice Judaism? Did you ask him if they go to temple? I mean, how can you possibly know that they're Jewish? I think you're right, they are Jewish, but how did you know they're Jewish? It probably has nothing to do with the fact that they practice in Judaism. It has everything to do with the way they look, right? And so that's why, for me, I still affiliate ethnically with being Jewish. That's what I was, that's what I am, but not religiously at the time.
Yeah, and it's we haven't got enough time to unpack it here, but it's a fascinating sort of concept, really, isn't it? Just as to where we are in the world in 2020, there's just it's just the world is a melting pot of ethnicities and cultures, and just trying to understand how that stuff has shaped you, Michael. I mean, does it still, you can recount those stories like they yesterday. I'm assuming that despite all your success and things you've done, there's still a lot of hurtful memories about sort of being bullied and sort of having to be the outcast, if you like, within that community.
I mean, like it took me a while, right? So it took me a while to, and probably the best thing that happened to me is eventually moving to Israel, because that was it was probably very healing for me. And it was the first time where I felt I belong. I can be open about being Jewish. And I was proud of being Jewish. I felt great for being Jewish.
Yeah.
But you're right. And like the fact is that, here we are talking right now, right? It's 40 plus at this point, years old. And, we're talking about my experience when I was 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. And I can recall today, right, with a great level of detail, a lot of the fights, a lot of the situations that I was in, that I painfully remember all the details. And obviously the scar is somewhere in my mind, has not gone away completely. And, it was good. I think it helped me that as I started moving from, Belarus to Bulgaria and to Israel and the United States, I start feeling freer and freer of being able to say who I am and, not expect that I'm going to get, punched in the face 2 minutes later if I say that I'm Jewish.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, and we laughed about this when you spoke, but I mean, you have one of the best behavior detection programs, I believe, in the world, but I still say that there's a part of your program somewhere that does come from you being that 6 and 7 year old. So, there is a methodology that you teach. And there is a system behind it, but I still say your intuition, really guides you, Michael. Fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that, I mentioned some of your accolades and the things that you've done. I mean, since you definitely moved here to the US, I mean, you've achieved some great things with Rozin Consulting. But me and you are very similar. That we both had an absent father during our lives, and you're sort of your birth father. And again, we sort of touched on this during our discussion. And for me, I've always left my father sort of in the past, but I've never met him. And thinking, if I do meet him, what is he going to think of me? What am I going to think of him? And I don't believe he's still alive, but I've got to a good place where I could push that aside. Whereas I know that you, Michael, with your absent father, you did sort of choose to make contact with him, and that also shaped you as a man. So, I mean, maybe let's just start off from sort of there. What was there's two ways that you can go. You can either say, if this person hasn't been in my life, I want to find them and work out why I am the way I am, or you can sort of just, not have any communication, but, you chose to try and get to know your father. Maybe tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. I think the choice that when it comes to my father, that I made, and I'll tell you more about that, the overall situation, but the choice that I made is to try to be a better father.
Yeah.
I think, maybe I'm stubborn enough and committed enough, and, I just committed to never do to my kids, right? Kind of what he was okay doing to me, right? In essence, not being the father figure, right? But what happened is, I really never had him in my life ever. When I was born, I guess, the marriage between my mom and him fell apart. And best I want to know, it's probably justified based on his behavior at the time. He has always been, my dad's side of the family, they always had a career in the military. So they're higher ranking officers in the Russian military at the time, and so was he. So their marriage fell apart, and, really there was no kind of attempt from him to see me or in any shape and form at all until I was 15 years old. And at that time I already lived in Bulgaria. It was also very tough economic times. I think Bulgaria, we can talk about it later, but Bulgaria also shaped part of why I do what I do, I think, now today in a business standpoint. But when I was 15, I really, something got into me, and I was like, I really want to meet this guy. I need to know who my father is. And so I was really nagging my mom, who eventually, agreed to do it. She called my grandpa, and they were able to kind of orchestrate it. And so when I was 15, we flew back to Russia, Belarus. I drove something like 600 miles to meet him, and I spent a day with him. And it was kind of like this, it's a very strange experience, right? From one, you look at the person, right, and it's like he happened to look a lot like me. So
happened to like that.
Yeah. So he looks very much like me, and so it's like you see yourself for a second. It's really strange. There was some kind of instantaneous kind of like connection that you feel right there. Yeah. You cannot, it's true. Like you just right away feel that natural connection, and it all sounded good. And you can tell a lot of course, stories to 15 years old, and he promised, right, to be in touch and try to kind of repair the relationship moving forward. And he never had been in touch ever until when I married, right, and I was in the United States. My wife too, she bugged me, you really gotta maybe try to get in touch with your father and kind of repair that relationship one way or the other. And I wrote him a letter, and kind of the response that I got, it was very much obvious that he was a lot about himself and only himself. And I just, I really, it was a good kind of those experiences. So it's, on one side, I miss having that figure in my life. On the other side, it just, when you go through life and you go through marriage, you go through situations, there's ups and downs, right? There's, it's normal. And I always remember, right, that, how important it is to not do, right, what he did. So that kind of keeps me in line.
And so we all have our own struggles, but what do you struggle with the most, or what do you struggle to understand the most about that situation of him being absent, or perhaps you have all the answers? I don't know, Michael.
Being a father right now, right, what's difficult for me to understand is I just cannot imagine being me right? Not wanting or doing everything I can possibly do, right? Even if I was in his situation, doing everything that I can possibly humanly do to try to be, a parent figure for my kids, right? To be in touch with them, to have communications with them, to have a relationship with them, because they are extension of me, and they are ultimately, I feel like, the legacy that you leave behind you is your kids, really. And I think that I cannot understand. And I probably should just accept it and move on. I still haven't.
Yeah, and I think I said this to someone recently, but I wonder if you ever do. I don't know. I think you, for all hurt and pain that happens in our life, I think you get to a point where you understand it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt any longer, even still to these days. I can be watching I think I watched a mushy Disney film with my sons the other day, and it was talking about, a father had passed away. And even then I find myself getting emotional. You still struggle with these things. So it could be something that you might never fully resolve, but you've got a fantastic and beautiful family, and you're doing what you can to change.
Same.
And then, so if we let's move on to Bulgaria for a bit. So I know you said that Bulgaria shaped you. So tell me about that then. So how did Bulgaria shape the Michael Rozin?
It was interesting. So the Bulgaria experience, I told you one part of my family, right? My dad's side, there's always been that kind of military link in my family. We had generals in the Russian military, we had majors, so there's always that part of me, right? The military, law enforcement, security oriented part. When I got to Bulgaria, at the time where the Soviet Union, right, was collapsing, and with the Soviet Union collapse, the Eastern Bloc of countries that Soviet Union was basically the center of it were collapsing economically as well. Bulgaria was one of them. And so when I got to Bulgaria, right, things start turning, there was 1 year where things were nice. And Bulgaria is a wonderful country, beautiful place, with great people. Highly recommend to visit for anyone, right? So after this Corona times.
You're becoming a travel agent now as well.
Yeah. I strongly recommend.
That's your long list of things to do.
Bulgaria is fantastic, really. So when I got there, the economy started going for the worse. So it was a situation where inflation keeps going up, and imagine going to a store and buying a loaf of bread for $1 this Monday.
Yeah.
Fast forward a week from now, that loaf of bread cost $1.25. A week later, it costs $2. 3 weeks later, it costs $2.50, and on and on and on. The value of the Bulgarian currency started dropping significantly. The economy, because it was heavily dependent on business with Soviet Union, starts just collapsing. The GDP of Bulgaria just start crashing. My mom and my stepdad in Bulgaria, which is my stepdad was one of the reasons why we ended up in Bulgaria. He's from Bulgaria. Well, they had jobs. My mom was a doctor, and she able to somehow, relearn everything, learn new language, and certify as a doctor in Bulgaria. In fact, despite the fact that she had a job and my stepdad had a job, they had a hard time paying just the basic bills with their job, right? And so here I am, right, at the age of 14, and live in Bulgaria, and we did not have enough money for anything, right? Honestly, I did not have money so my friends would buy new shoes to play basketball. I could not do it, right? I could not buy new jeans. There was no money for me to just go and spend money on ice cream, right? There was no money for me to go buy a lemonade because there's all extra money, and literally every dollar for us counted, right? So, and that, now of course I completely understand the situation my parents were in, but at the time as a 14-year-old kid, it's very frustrating.
Yeah,
the 14-year-old kid,
yeah.
I remember. I remember. Oh, interesting. I remember, right, that 14-year-old birthday party of mine, and that was kind of what triggered me. Was I couldn't have a birthday party because I literally could not buy enough stuff to have my friends over, just like desserts. That was the kind of like the situation we were in, and so. that summer when I was 14, I said, I got to do something about it. And so I got my first job. My first job was in sales. What I was supposed to do was I started working for this company. It was like a food distribution company. They were selling variety of pastas and ketchups and olives and all different products. So at 14, I signed up to be a sales guy. And so they gave me a catalog, they educated me in a catalog, and I was supposed to go in a certain area of the city, Varna, that's where I lived. I had to go from shop to shop to shop to shop to shop to shop to shop.
Well, that is real sales, Michael, walking around with a catalogue and for something that someone doesn't need. Yeah,
it was direct sales, and I had to find that grocery store owner. I had to persuade him that what we have is of value and sell him, take the order, and the company would deliver. And, I remember still the first sales shop I had, the sales call I have to make, right? I show up there. I'm like, oh my gosh, here I had this 14-year-old schmuck, right? But I somehow did it and it went okay. I managed to place the first order, which boosted my confidence. And so like working that summer, I was able to make enough money now to basically sustain myself pretty much on my own. So I was able to pay for all the shoes and the jeans and the stuff that I wanted and the ice creams and such. So I like this idea. And I still had to go to school, of course. But the situation kept getting worse. And so when I was 15 years old, several months later, I come across a situation where like we were again desperate. And one of my friends' moms opened a little bakery in their garage and she started making eclairs. And I was like, maybe let me try this. Let me try putting together a little something here. And so what I did is she made 3 different types of eclairs, which I asked her to make 3 different types of eclairs. I made a catalog of those 3 eclairs and a little fancy description why they're so nice and a price tag. And I started trying. I took my catalog and just like I did working for that company, I started going store to store, trying to place orders for those eclairs. Parallel, I placed an advertisement for a guy, an adult with a truck, like a van, which we redesigned and made it like a delivery van.
Okay.
With some rafts. And so I would go one day, I would place orders. The next day, I would hire this guy that I'll pay him hourly, and we'll start delivering the eclairs to the stores that I place orders. And I saw like it started getting into somewhat, sustained business, right? And so I put an advertisement in the newspaper, and I was able to hire a few students, older students than me in Varna. And I separated them by areas of the city. And so they start doing this for me. So they started working with catalogs, placing orders. I'll pay them their sales commission. And my guy would start delivering, and then I got more of those sales guys. So we covered the entire town. And so the deliveries start happening every day now. So every day we have deliveries happening. I mean, every day there are sales of a lot of eclairs at this point. I was really good about developing personal relationship with the customers, being very responsive to their needs, right? If there's anything wrong, we will always be on top of it. To work with me was very easy versus working with large distribution companies. And so I like this concept, and I start adding products to my catalog. So it was the wholesale products, so like some candies, and then whatever. I end up with like a 4 or 5 page catalog of things.
Wow.
Eventually. And so I started making some real money, and that's 15 going into 16 years old. And at that point, right, I was 16 years old. So one of the lessons I learned is the responsible thing I did is I helped my parents a lot. I was covering the food bills, I was covering the house bills, I was covering everything else that they needed help with. Yeah. And parallel with that, I was also spending now maybe unnecessary amount of money on myself.
But you got to enjoy yourself as well, Michael. You got to live.
I got a little overboard, having to have a driver drive me to high school. And
oh, wow. You must have been selling a lot of these eclairs, Mike, I'd say.
There's a lot of eclairs. And so, eventually, what happened is one of those bigger companies, distribution companies, we start affecting their business because their products were not selling. My guys were, we were a little more robust and quicker, I think. And so they just picked the same type of line of products that we're selling, and they just lowered the prices of those products like less than 50%. And so, when I was making money, I did not have much money in reserve. I was spending it as I was making it. And so, maybe it took him a month, and, all their clients went back to them because, their prices was better, and I was out of business at that point.
Yeah. And it's interesting because really, Michael, I mean, you're a security professional now, but what I'm hearing, it really is from a young age, you've always been very entrepreneurial. I mean, like I said, you built the program at Mall of America. And I should say, if I'm imagining when you're saying eclairs, just want to say for the listeners, because it might not be too much of an American thing, is that like the long chocolate pastry?
That's right. Yeah, the long chocolate pastry with the cream inside. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, I don't know. I've been here 9 years now. You've been here a little bit longer. I've never seen those here in the US. So I'm wondering how many people are going to be going on Google now and googling chocolate eclairs, because that's what it is.
They're
it's a
delicious.
Long pastry.
Still my favorite dessert. Favorite dessert.
Well, maybe they should just go to email info@Rozin Consulting, and then you can sell them. You can sell them some.
For my birthday here, my daughter made me amazing tray of eclairs.
Oh, there you go.
I was so happy.
You'll be a clever. And I was just looking, I didn't see that anywhere on your bio, so you need to add that to your website, Michael. But I mean, joking aside, you're obviously very entrepreneurial. You're very sort of programmatic, and you've created several programs. But then, when you transitioned to America, you met your beautiful wife, Katie, and you sort of moved here to the US. That posed some challenges in itself, because it's not necessarily easy to sort of just transition into the US. So what was your experience like maybe when you first arrived? Because before you started at Mall of America, there was a journey to get there. I think you told me once that you were a laborer on a building site. So, you're not shy of hard work, but Michael being a laborer on a building site isn't something that comes straight to my mind.
Yeah. Good question. So I not only moved to the United States, right? And that was, I never imagined I'll end up in the United States. I was absolutely happy in Israel, and I loved everything I was doing there. I had a successful career path, and here I meet this, Katie, right? And it's a love from first sight and fireworks with that. And after some time on relationship, Katie was very clear from the very beginning that she does not see herself living in Israel, and she would want to be back with her family. And so I had a choice to make, basically from the beginning of meeting her, ultimately, right, I made that choice. And, despite all the cold and misery in Minnesota here, she's worth it. So I not only moved to the United States, I kind of left my job there, and I moved in the middle of the winter to Minnesota, right? So getting out of the airplane and seeing all the snow around was a little shock in the system. Yeah. But, the biggest, in the beginning, you come and I realized a couple of things pretty quick here in the United States. One, you realize that anything that the status that you had and all that you have, before, it cannot, you have to start from scratch. You literally have to start from scratch here. Yes, now at this point I have some skills, I have some experience, I have some training, I know something, but I cannot, let my title in Israel and my position there and all the years, somehow get in my mind. So I needed to put this away. I need to put this aside and be willing to start from scratch. Second, though, I also saw and I smelt it right away. How this country, right? It's like, and you probably can say the same thing living in Europe. It is not like no other place on earth. Like the opportunities here, right, and the ability to do whatever you want, the freedom that we have here in the United States is a true privilege, I think. And I smelt it also, how that kind of right and the freedom and the opportunities were everywhere. So I had to make some money, right? So my first, I barely speak English. I went to school here. I went back to school just to pick up my English a bit. I needed some jobs, and the only jobs that were available were kind of in construction. Now, I've done a lot of things, right, in the military, but construction just was never one of those things that I was good at, right? And plus, building houses in like Bulgaria and stuff is different than the United States.
Well, you should have started a catalogue, Michael, as to how to build a house, getting bricks and cement and doing things.
That's right.
Around the building site, yeah.
So it was interesting. It was like, it was tough, right? But I had to do what I had to do, right? To kind of just make some money and put some food on the table, so to speak, right? And I also did not want to be that guy, right? Who moved here, right? I have, now Katie is my fiance at this point, and I did not want to be the guy who just kind of like hangs on her neck, right? Because, whatever I wanted to, to be able to do and contribute as I always have.
Do you think it was easier, Michael, to transition here, knowing that, already in your life before you moved to the US, you'd already lived in 3 different countries, you speak different languages, but, I guess one of your things is that you're used to starting again, and not in a negative way. Like you said, you have to put all your success in Israel behind you and say, okay, well, I can't have that back. I've got to look forward. What can I do to be successful again? Do you think that's part of where your success comes from now? You've done it before.
I think so. I do think so. It was I've been moving basically, every 8 years or so in my life. At that point, I've been always moving. And every time I'm in a completely different situation, I had to adapt to a new language, to a new culture, to a new economy, to a new, develop new set of friends and acquaintances. And, I think if I haven't done that, right, and just come to the United States without any of that, I think it would have been a lot tougher to put all that aside and be willing to just open up and go exploring and try your best in this country. So I think that's definitely, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there, Simon, that, that kind of experience of moving from place to place, adapting to new situations, dealing with economic challenges in other countries, dealing with discriminatory challenges, dealing with, all that stuff. It's experience that United States I was able to apply it, and it went relatively easy for me.
Yeah, and I guess did you? Is it strange that perhaps you feel most at home being a Jewish man living in the US? I mean, is that something which is a strange concept, bearing in mind some of the countries you've lived at in Europe, but that the way you feel most at home being a Jew is in America?
It is, I think it's the 2 places, right, that I feel most at home in the United States, without a doubt. Israel, of course, is going to be part of my identity, and I like what Israel stands for. But it's something about, I think it's something about the truly the freedom that you have in the United States that you don't feel. I don't know how you felt when you left in UK, right, versus coming back here and coming here. But, for me, it just feels the freedom and the opportunities to do your best and maximize your potential in the United States. It's so much greater, right, than in any other place on earth.
I agree. Yeah, I'd agree.
And I think that is what I think at the end of the day, right, being free and being ability to go in whatever directions you want to go and do well and make a difference, right, is what makes you feel most at home at the end of the day, right? This country is not perfect, right? Every country has its quirks. I mean, and look, we're going through a period of time where a lot of those imperfections are right on the surface. But I think with all those imperfections that this country exists, based on my experience, I still think this is the greatest place on earth to be in, and I would not want to be in any other place.
Yeah, and I think also, the part of your upbringing, your mum's done an incredible job raising you as a man. I'm sure your stepfather played a role in that as well, and how you moved around. But I remember when I moved to the US, and maybe a slightly different path than you, Michael. I think I'd only been here 7 or 8 weeks when you were transitioning out of Mall America, and then I was coming in to replace you. But I can remember, you were. When me and you met a couple of weeks ago, and I was driving home. I was thinking about this. You were one of the first people in the US that actually showed me kindness. And then you and your wife took me out, and we went out for a meal. And that, I think looking back, that meant an awful lot because you'd been through that before. Whereas others might just say, okay, well, this is a guy here. You purposely invited sort of me out for a meal, and I think that was that act of kindness. You're going to be stuck with me for life because that really was good. I was reflecting driving home from meeting you, thinking that was a great moment. So, Mike, as we sort of start to wrap up then, so, there's so many great things you've done. And I know right now, the SIRA program, like I said, that has taken off and it's going across the US, and you're traveling internationally with that now. And I know that you've started a new company, Rozin Technologies. So maybe just tell us a little bit about what Rozin Technologies is now doing.
Yeah. So, Rozin Security, and that's going to kind of lead to why Rozin Technologies became the thing. Rozin Security Consulting has been quite a road, right? And it's been fun and to innovate. And, we in Rozin Security, we kind of do three main things, right? One was this security consulting work that we do throughout the United States and internationally, designing entities and assessing large institutions, helping a client navigate and manage risk. We have a threat management division where we help our clients assess threats as they receive them, come up with the right program and manage those threats. And many times we're successful. We help them avoid the problems or being able to stop the problems in the right way. And then we developed the SIRA concept that I talked about earlier, the behavior threat detection program. And going through client to client, instituting those programs in the United States, I realized that there's a big piece missing to the puzzle, which is the ability to really share information in real time and identify trends in real time. In other words, right, security many times functions before bad things happen, right? That's where the most use of security is, right? Is you want to have security that it's preventative by nature, that stops bad things from happening. And for that to work, you have to have trained people, you have to have procedures, but you have to have the ability to kind of, if this guy shows up at this facility, right, today, preparing, thinking about what he's going to do tomorrow, and he comes back again a week later, right, a security needs to be able to know that it happened twice. And this is the second time that this happens. And because it's the second time, there's more significance to it and more action is to be taken because that's the case. I realized that concept, the ability to share information in real time, identify those trends in real time, not after the fact, not investigating after things happen, but now, because now is when it could, the ability for security to know that this is the person that we have seen the second time or the third time here would mean a very different action versus inaction. And so from that kind of problem, we develop our software called TIPS, Threat Information Protection System. And that's where Rozin Technologies become a company. So Rozin Technologies as a company, our main product is TIPS. It's a newer product that we put on the market 2 years ago, and we've been evolving more and more, and we're very excited. A new and better and really fantastic version of it coming up this fall. So stay tuned. But the idea behind the software that's now used by many private sector organizations, some government entities. The idea is that it's an app as well as software that you can use on a dashboard in any command and control center. You can input information based on what you see or through surveillance systems. You can open cases. And there are, we used AI and smart algorithms that can help identify real trends in real time. So as you put information on this vehicle that you see out there, the system will tell you in real time, by the way, there are two other organizations that have seen the same vehicle, or you have seen the same vehicle, 5 months ago, whatever that might be. And so we have had some real fantastic success rates with this software that we've been using. And so that's how Rozin Technologies evolved. And next year, we're adding some fantastic features here. And so next year, I think Rozin Technologies will really shine through
Yeah, I mean, you just, whenever I hear you talk about it, it's just the entrepreneurial spirit just shines through, Michael. That's what I love. You can't stop. The wonder your wife is, when you guys travel on the road, she must hate it when you wake up in the middle of the night. Katie, I've got another idea.
She's like, oh no, here we go again.
Here we go again. But Michael, it's been really good to talk to you, like I said, and also for your openness and honesty to sort of to share your story with others, because, quite often, there's so many fantastic things you've done, and I see you on the news, and I'm like, yeah, there's a guy with an Israeli accent. There's so much more. Yeah, there's just so much more to who you are. So it's really great that you can share it and be a bit vulnerable about your childhood and your father and stuff. So, Michael, what is the best way to people look at some of your stuff? So is it Rozin Security is the tagline, but Rozin Security, and what is Rozin Technology? Just Rozin Technologies? Maybe talk about where people can find
That's right. Yeah. You guys, you can just easily find me online by www.rozinsecurity.com or at www.rozinsecurity.com. Both websites are live, and there's a lot of information about everything we do. I post my interviews there sometimes, and
you're always on the TV. We'll just end it there. I can tell you, whenever I turn the news on, something's Michael's there. I'm like, there he is. But Michael, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me on Who I Became.
Simon, fantastic. This is a lot of fun. Thank you for having me here.
Take care.
Thank you for joining us for the Who I Became podcast. If you are enjoying the discussions between Simon and his guests, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review, as well as share with your friends on social media. Once again, thank you for joining the Who I Became podcast.